I didn't do a show this morning, so in my mind, since this is my ministry, my job, I hope this is a good one. I did talk to RJ. The daylight savings thing has got me, like right now, it still seems like it's 6 o'clock and I should be preparing. I have this, un momento. There is no beginning of a vortex spiral. Spinning down the drain sparks thinking, gestalt type thinking. We were studied by rats in a large maze. Was it John Calhoun? Yep, I believe that's his name. He studied the rats and they provided everything. Like we kind of have just enough of everything. And well, then I wrote down when it comes to gay sex, the Bible is clearly against it in every circumstance. God hates abortion. He calls it child sacrifice. No gravity is pulling you toward the center of a globe. No way you could have avoided hearing this if you ever hear this tonight, tomorrow. It's a flat earth channel. It's a channel that thinks 9/11 was an inside job. They've lied about history, theology, the Bible in judgment. And I'm going to do a show and talk about it until the power goes out or something like that. Hey, I got to start closing these out, right? Fair use disclaimer. I'm going to be showing some other videos and doing what I do. I like to talk about the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, trying to cause division. Am I trying to cause division? Full time job, I guess. The Bible to me, and I heard it again, and I decided I got to talk about it again. If somebody's going to listen, it's all about the division. Now, I got a couple of here. There must be, this is how that thumbnail started out. Well, that's how it ended up. You saw how it started out. I kind of cut out the picture of the guy, but there must be division. That's what it says. We're going to look at this here. What do you see? It's an explosion. Another the Thunderbolts. This is a 12-year-old video. The Lord put it on my mind. Here it is. I'm glad some of you remember it or may have heard about it. Buddy James, we're going to look at, are we going to look at some of his videos or just some of his friends' fancy drawings? When I looked at it, this is one from the 1880s they copy their ideas from. It's got a Bible verse here, and here this guy's famous, this Walter Russell. They're still into gravity and stuff, you know. This here is NORAD 1961, Walter, and is that Lynn Russell? Did something at NORAD, and everybody went, whoa, check it out. This guy drew a picture of it. He said, I got this thing just running in my head. What is it? They said it's a vortex type of a situation, depolarizing cathoids, anti gravity ray guns. No, I'm just kidding. There'll be no ray guns. Look, I was getting into, we'll look at some of Gerald Pollock's electrically structured water. Some people are for it, some are against it. Some people it says that's not an exclusion zone. Water doesn't, you know, make it slippery on the side, so this stuff just flushes right down in a draining spiral. Hey, Stellium 7 is out. We're going to look at his things here. He said nobody's done any work on the Titans. He thinks it's trees because he doesn't want to believe that stones are reserved in judgment. He wouldn't even Titan. What does that even mean to you? I got to read this. I'm going to read it. It's a privilege to read it. Neoliberalism has caused or contributed to most of the crises that now confront us: rising inequality, rampant child poverty, epidemic disease of despair, offshoring, and erosion of the tax base, the slow degradation of healthcare, education, and other public services, the crumbling of infrastructure, democratic backsliding, the 2008 financial crash, the rise of modern day demagogues, our ecological crisis, and environmental disaster so pervasive has neoliberalism become that we no longer even recognize it as an ideology. We see it as a kind of natural law, like Darwinian selection, thermodynamics, or even gravity, an immutable fact, a non negotiable reality. Oh, so the people that are going to point out, hey, look, man, it's those liberals. And they're a problem. There ain't no doubt about it. They all are into gay sex and things like that. It's just anti Bible. But they believe in Darwin, thermodynamics, gravity, and they treat it as an immutable fact. Hey, yes, you right. What's going on, man? You've been leaving me some interesting comments.
I, that's all. Actually, this is my first time live on YouTube, so I appreciate it. But I apologize for the darkness. I'm walking in my neighborhood, my dog. So I'm fascinated by your show. Love the content always, and it's the only actually channel I watch anymore. So appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Your question this afternoon. Let me refresh my memory. It was. Give me a second.
Oh yeah, I think it was
Give me a
Matthew.
second.
Yeah.
Uh, can you clarify Matthew 24? You mentioned wars, rumors of wars, something like that, first century context. So that was it. I just think that Titus, the one who was probably the abomination of desolation, the guy who exalted himself and said, I'm the king now, there's going to never, and you can't have continuing sacrifices when a general, a declared demigod declares, I've taken over Jerusalem, strip the gold off these bricks. That didn't happen in a vacuum. Rome has been kicking ass. Jerusalem knew they were coming. Are they coming for us? I guess that's just like a rumor of war. It's one of the things that the Lord brought out to me. Like, I was doing this for probably 2 years before, when people used to ask me, well, what about the great falling away? This can't happen unless there's a great falling away. And I think it was that night or something. I'm reading the Bible in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15, and it said, Timothy, all of Asia has departed me. Put that in context to the seven churches of Revelation and the other churches that they wrote to that were in that area. They were Paul's pride and joy for a while, and they fell away. Not every single person, but as a whole, there was a great falling away mentioned in the New Testament. So it was all falling in line, falling in line. Got a bunch of videos I got to go over that RJ sent me. Your your microphone is working remarkably well for somebody just walking. Now, I don't have where what country are you in the United States?
I am in Central Florida. I'm on my iPhone walking in my neighborhood. I'm pretty close to a 5G tower, so that's probably why.
That's funny. It's funny. What's your name? What should I call you? Yeshuite?
Jason, I'm Jason.
Jason.
Yeah.
So you're a snob, huh? Because you've got an iPhone. Is that what they say? Is that what the people in the world do?
They must. Well, actually, it's a work provided phone, so I'm just using what they gave me.
My, you know what? My wife would never use anything but an iPhone and a Mac pad, not a Mac pad.
Mac
And
Pro.
they give her the no, they they give her stuff too. They give her the phone. It's an iPhone. They give her that little pad they use. The NFL uses it on the sidelines.
Oh,
So
the iPad. Yeah.
it's not an iPad. It's the Microsoft some
The Surface. Yeah, yeah. The
flip or
Surface.
something like that. It's a flip.
I think the Microsoft no, the Surface.
It doesn't matter. Hey, I'm going to go over. I want to finish reading some of these things about the neoliberals and then get into what RJ sent me this morning. A lot of cool stuff. Got to just find out, get in with what I'm doing here. Am I okay? So I got a new one from RJ.
Hello, America. Dave Hodges here, host of the Common Sense Show. We have the show that's freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad that you're with us. We appreciate you. We appreciate you because you want to make this country better than it's been.
Good
John
luck
McCain
on
and
that.
Ted Kennedy, two notables, actually died from this. I think we need to take a look at this, and I want to play this clip for you here, this audio. And I think it's very revealing in a pragmatic sense. And then I'm going to tell you what you can do about it.
Getting things.
That simple, innocent question from my son floored me. I knew at that moment that not only was I spending too much time using my cell phone, but I realized it was also making me forget things.
Huh. New scientific discovery reveals how your cell phone is silently tracking you and hurting your health too. Oh my goodness. Let's look at some funny things. I steal from taxpayers. I love war. I don't know what a woman is. Oh man. There are no blue states, just some big blue red cities. Now who is this? They are undoing everything you did as president. Oh, that's Jill Biden. I was president? I guess he was the president of the auto pen. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So this was interesting too. You can't watch all of this, but
Now
this
let's
was
take a step back into the real world and evaluate or think about what happens when somebody smokes cannabis or ingests cannabis by way of edible or a tincture or something of that sort. Cannabis is very fast to enter the bloodstream. In fact, within 30 seconds, it's going to enter the brain and permeate throughout the brain and body. That's very, very fast. I mean, when you contrast that with something like alcohol or even nicotine, depending on how the nicotine is delivered, that is a very fast delivery of the psychoactive and biologically active compound, which in this case is THC and CBD and probably some other things as well. So within 30 seconds, it reaches the brain and bodily tissues. And within 30 to 60 minutes, it's going to reach its peak concentrations and have its peak biological effects. Those aren't always the same thing. In the
RJ,
case
what
of
is
cannabis,
this?
again, here I'm using cannabis as a kind of umbrella term for THC and CBD. The effects are going to peak at about 30 to 60 minutes after bringing those compounds into the body in some way or another. And the effects tend to last anywhere from 3 to 4 hours, although there's some variation.
Huh. I'm going to jump ahead.
Brain and body is going to harbor that THC molecule and the CBD molecule for quite a long while, at least 80 days. Okay, so if someone smokes cannabis or they ingest cannabis, very rapidly gets into the bloodstream, and the components that are psychoactive get into the bloodstream and are immediately able to access neurons and other cells and start having these effects of parking at those endogenous cannabinoid receptors and impacting the signaling between neurons, which leads to the subjective effects of cannabis, including THC and CBD. So let's talk about what those different subjective effects are. Again, this is going to vary depending on whether or not people are ingesting sativa varieties of cannabis. Just to remind you, those tend to be elevated mood, alertness, talkativeness. People who take sativa varieties tend to talk a lot more than they would otherwise. Again, there are exceptions to this. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm sure there are people out there shouting, although I guess if you're the quiet people who don't talk too much, you're probably not shouting, or if you're not doing it on sativa. Joke intended. But in any event, there are exceptions, but there are also general rules. And the sativas tend to meet people sort of mood elevated, energetic, again, the sort of head high. And indica varieties tend to do the opposite, more of a sedative, relaxant, etc. Why and how would they do that? Okay, well, without going into an extensive deep dive into the different neurotransmitter systems of the brain and body, what we know for sure is that CB1 receptors are present on an enormous number of different neurons and brain structures and neural circuits.
What?
So intense anxiety and paranoia, and who will experience intense relaxation, focus, and sense of creativity from ingesting or smoking a type 1, type 2, or type 3 sativa? Well, there is no way to predict that. And there's a lot of kind of what I would call street lore or dorm room lore, or kind of not peer reviewed, but sort of peer discussed, I mean, among friends and people and acquaintances, lore out there that what one needs to do is simply smoke more, right? Or just ingest more. You hear that. Indica and its components, right? Again, we're still talking about THC and
I don't know. Now, as far as indica goes, it's pretty much what I smoke all the time. Sativa, to me, besides Maui Wowie and Acapulco Gold and some of the old classics from back in the 70s, they're sativas, but most of the sativas are, I don't get it, but a lot of people, they like it. Hey, did you see me? I smoked a bong hit of some concentrate. Supposedly $4 a gram, and it's non-GMO. Welcome there, you guys. Good to see you. Had Yeshuite Jason on earlier. He dropped off. He was walking. Very interesting. We're going over the emails RJ sent me. Hopefully I'm sharing the screen. I was not, but now I am. Is that enough weed? Somebody got caught lying. Liars. Lying.
Constitutionally, you have found that it is illegal for anyone to be charged a property tax on their real estate.
Holy,
yes, that is
whoa.
why the 16th Amendment says you can tax.
What? Oh my goodness. That means I was getting charged over $9,000 a year with all my taxes. They were just
income. You cannot tax
ooh,
property.
those are nice
We
houses.
are at the tipping point. The property values have skyrocketed in the last
My
5
house
years.
was not that nice.
21.25 trillion of property overvaluation has occurred. Look at what's happened and what caused it to skyrocket. It wasn't the market. It was the fraud at the hands of these school districts. What's hidden from the public is how much school bond debt is associated on a per household basis across the United
This is what, in reading, the 16th Amendment here to the U.S. Constitution, is saying that that's unconstitutional, that you're taxed on this gain. It's an unrealized gain. You haven't realized you may be living in that house. You're paying the same mortgage payment over 30 years. You haven't taken that extra money and stuck it in your pocket. Mitch, can you kind of explain this concept?
People got the extra money in their pocket somewhere. So this was not so funny.
Trying to build back up the U.S. Army. They're struggling with recruitment drives everywhere, a dangerous time in the world where there's all these conflicts going on. What is your thinking about how the narrative around compelling people on certain health issues with respect to COVID has changed over the last several years of the pandemic?
Well, I got to look at this closely as chairman of a commission for the medical journal Lancet, and the sad part of this, not
name
with
dropper,
respect to the vaccine per se, but with respect to the origin of the virus, is that it's yet another case of massive government lying. So,
he must be talking about some other government, Dr. Sachs.
Kind of the public reporting in terms of continuing to pursue answers about who was responsible for lab leak. Robbie and I have these conversations often where there's often a focus on Dr. Fauci, who's of course no longer in office. And there is this kind of open question, where do we go next? Where should an investigation go? And should Democrats not be leaving this investigation largely up to the right side of the aisle?
yeah, it's interesting. I fell right into the mainstream story
This
at the
is
beginning because there was this important publication in Nature, which is
we might get to some more of this COVID stuff.
part of the genome of the COVID virus that makes it so infectious. And that was the object of research by US scientists precisely to see if you put that piece into an existing virus, what happens to it? Well, isn't that research a little dangerous?
I think that's why people like him, because he'll just jump out there and go, well, duh.
I've studied the issue extensively. The one thing I would say is that I think almost without a doubt it is a lab release, and very, very likely it originated in a U.S. laboratory.
You know what these guys don't like? Hi, Marcella. You know what these guys don't like, Marcella? They don't like being called stupid. No, they're the guys that can be. We read some quotes earlier. I should go back, and there are a couple more I want to finish about the neoliberals that are in the schools. But Bill Gates is not stupid. If I've studied that child and what they did to him to make him crack that code of how it was like, you're going to school and your job is to crack this code. That's all he did at his grade school that cost $60,000 a year. They had a bake sale and they bought a computer so he could break the code. He thinks he earned something. They just used him, but they're smart. They don't like to be called stupid. That's what Dr. Sachs is mad about. He's still a gravity-loving, Darwinist. And it's easy because, he's smart, but he's wrong about a lot of things because he doesn't have that spirit that's written on everyone's heart working in his favor.
That was involved in viral manipulation, but in a program perhaps that wanted to test the virus in Wuhan as well. because Wuhan had bat colonies and other reasons. And so the U.S. has
Remember
a
that
lot
video of that
research
girl
to
eating
do,
that bat?
and
I wonder
a
how much
lot
they
of people
paid
know
her.
that. It's interesting that Mr. Fauci was
A live
given a
bat,
pardon
like
in advance
Ozzy
of any
Osbourne. He got
charge
paid.
by Biden in the last hours. And one of the
Whoa.
reasons, although I don't know what was in
Ooh, that was
Biden's
important. I
thinking,
shouldn't have been
but
talking.
one
I'm
of the
going to go
reasons
back.
is one of the reasons, although I don't know what was in Biden's thinking, but one of the reasons is the charge that NIH, our National Institutes of Health, under Fauci, funded the research that ultimately led to the emergence of this virus. There's a lot that has not been made public about this yet. There are a lot of questions in the U.S.
Oh,
about this.
man, don't ever laugh at Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. He will come back. And some of these other guys now, like this guy.
Dr. Cruz, what's going on? What's the problem with artificial light?
Well, it destroys every bit of how your cell has been put together by evolution or God, whoever you choose to believe.
Well, being as he loved us while we were dead in our sins and gave us life, I'm going with God.
And you have to understand fundamentally how the wiring diagram inside the cell works. But you need to realize that the wiring diagram is powered by an external source of energy and information called the sun. Everything on this planet, including every speck of food that grows on it, any place in the world, doesn't matter the latitude, longitude you are, is linked to this. Every single animal on this planet, every sentient being is linked to this energy source.
Huh.
Machines in us, chimps and gorillas, have no sweat glands on their hands and feet. So I want you to think about that for a minute, but we do. Why is that? That's the reason humans have socks and no one else does, because our feet sweat. It's because when you have a wet connection, you make a better connection with the tectonic plate. So I want you to do another hard stop. England and Europe used to be a really good place to get really nice shoes that were leather. Can you buy leather-based shoes anymore? No, you can't. Dermatologists and Bill Gates all want to block the sun because it's a very profitable message to get out. Your dad has completely fallen in line. Do you remember when we were talking about the stuff you said, let's not talk about it? This is why you need to talk about it. Because guess what? Compliance with a centralized system leads to problems. You don't realize how it happens.
He could be more vague. It leads to problems. Whew. Kind of an understatement right there. So let's see. Maybe we'll get to some more lights in a minute. I want to thank everybody that sends me those videos and asks me these questions. So this guy he got a job now. And this made me mad. Jimmy Dore, really? You have to play it twice?
Anderson Cooper.
He plays this twice. We could.
Anything is we are
Just so that he can get people to listen extra time. You only have to listen once.
While I believe there are real problems to be addressed, I want to finish by reiterating my great respect for the work and mission of the NIH. If confirmed, I'll carry out President Trump's agenda of making the public science institutions of this country worthy of trust and serve to make America healthy again.
Okay. Well, all I can tell him is that he'd better.
You can't have trust unless you are transparent. And if I'm confirmed as NIH director, I fully commit to making sure that the American people can see all of the activities of the NIH openly with limited sort of obfuscation, which is characterized, I think, unfortunately, the NIH's way that they interacted with American people for its, it's not that no mistakes were ever made. You can't say that of anything.
Anyway, here's the intro.
Do what they want. He was right about that. He was defamed. He was smeared by people like Fauci and the corporate press. And now he's being appointed to the head of the NIH, which the guy who used to run it was a guy named Francis Collins, who's a criminal. So Dr. Jay Bhattacharya held nothing back in his Senate confirmation hearing. So,
Can you believe it? They lied. They lied about that COVID. Something cast out the slave woman. That just sounds so harsh. And her son. For the son of the slave woman will not inherit. I'm going to be jumping around just a little bit here. You hear this song from a prophet like Jesus? Because Jesus, there's this prophecy. You're going to raise up a prophet like me. So anyway, Moses wrote this song. He was about ready to send them on over to the other side. Assemble all the elders are going to teach him this song. I can't read it all, but it does mention the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are justice, a God of faithfulness without iniquity, just and upright is he. To this day, they have dealt corruptly with him. They are no longer his children because they are blemished. They are a crooked and twisted generation. Does that ring any bells about, hey, we're going to send somebody to make your path straight, you crooked, twisted generation? Like an eagle stirs up its nest that flutters over its young. You can just vision that, right? Spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinion. The Lord alone guided him. No foreign God was with him. He made him ride on the high places of the land. He ate the produce of the field. He suckled him with honey out of the rock and oil out of the flinty rock, curds from the herd, milk from the flock, with fat from the lands, rams from Bashan, and goats with the very finest of wheat. And you drank foaming wine made with the blood, that's the juice of the grape. Okay. Yikes. Grew fat, stout, sleek, then he forsake the God who made him, scoffed at the rock of his salvation. It's so easy to get stirred to jealousy with these strange gods who promise their Sodom and Gomorrah sex. Just go down to the corner. And we got a lot to cover here. Acts 15:9. Here's the new rules. Not circumcision, not Sabbath keeping. Abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. If you keep yourself from these, you will do well. Now, this is after no small dissension. There was division. Who are you going to get out? You're going to get out the people who want to tell you it's necessary to circumcise and order them to keep the law of Moses. You have to recognize division. Well, we need to be divided from them, So they gathered together and they told them, don't listen to any Judaizers that are going to come to you with their endless genealogies and dates and everything else. And they lay out 4 new laws. Now, they were trying to tell you something that it was necessary to keep the law. Well, instead, the called people of God that in the scripture describes their calling and their miracles that they performed to change the entire world to believe in Jesus Christ. They had better requirements. And they weren't going to burden the Gentiles with anything else but these requirements. Abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols and from blood, from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. If it's in the Bible really one time, that's enough. Some people say, no, it's gotta be in there twice. So they mention it twice in this chapter alone. They mention it up here, and then they craft the following letter and repeat it. Later, when Paul has raised some money to take to the Christians, the Hebrew Christians that were still obeying the law because that was their deal, he got in trouble. He had to go, he's visiting James, and and he's going like, you got to do these things. But as for the Gentiles who believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols and from blood and from what has been strangled and sexual immorality. That's that non-married Sodom and Gomorrah gay type, get a tattoo thing, whatever they got going there with their tramp stamps. I've had it explained to me, and you sure don't want to get a tramp stamp, I don't think. So he got arrested, but that's 3 times he mentioned it. It's important. Let's catch up on some of this neoliberalism. This really isn't, I'm calling it neoliberalism.
A 49% wage cut while the person with the market fund got free soda. Amazingly, through the miracle of inflation, the money decreases in value for everyone while the actual wealth itself moves up to the top.
The concept of the stock market was proposed in 1792, but it wasn't until
1792. So the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians did it.
1830 when the first stock was sold on the New York
There
Stock
it is. It's the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad Company. I can see some railroads in the future. They are already fudging the dates and forging it. That looks so suspicious to me. Come on.
Exchange. It was initially filled with railroads and banks, but by the next decade, everybody with a business idea.
That's a pretty big room, pretty fancy. It's just, they found it. They set up these little wooden stations. They could do whatever they want. They could drop the ball. They could celebrate New Year's Eve. Party.
Wanted to have their name listed. This rapidly stimulated both technological and economic growth, and by the end of the century, the middle class was getting more and more familiar with investment.
What are you talking about it, man? They set up that middle class after World War II. Here's a house, buy it for $10,000. It'll be worth $500,000, and when you pay it off in 40 years, and everybody will be wondering, how did you do it? They gave it to them so they can count on their retirement vote. But they did have to believe in gravity and Darwinism and cradle to the grave, take these vaccines even if you're old and have the flu. What?
At 50% of what it costs for me to make it. This would grow my customer base significantly and starve out the neighborhood children who I'd be competing with. And then
get out of there,
once I disrupted the lemonade market successfully, I'd work out a volume deal with lemon plantations and lower my costs while slowly raising prices for the customers so a profit could be realized. Blitzscaling, on the other hand, is a lot more reckless and assertive.
Yikes, dude, this guy is really into it.
Are no longer democratized. For example, in most dictatorships, the government will have an office that permits or denies which stories can run in the newspaper. In 2025, every piece of news that the average voter sees is manipulated by a third-party aggregator. Even if you go to something like
or AI, I got to keep zipping along, man. People don't like my old 3-hour videos, and I want to get to the point. Eventually, optical fibers for now. Hey, look at it. So I think if I want people to live in caves and hide out and the light is still important. There are ways that you can transfer light. And it might even help if you're not living in a cave. Some of these. Now, I was expecting more pictures of it, outdoorsy light of how it could help us. Now, hey, that's one of those core fibers. That's like a vortex. That's how they plan those coaxial cables. Okay. Well, we might as well write it out. Optical fiber cable set up like a vortex. Maybe we'll bump into that later. But why not put them underground?
And focal length. A 10 centimeter diameter PVC tube. 90 will quickly introduce some theoretical basics regarding optics and optical fibers. Then you will be able to adapt this tutorial to the supply you will have at your disposal. So we have the sunbeams that fed its diameter d and its focal length f. We might think that the bigger d is, the better, but that's not the case. We will see later why. Let's talk about the optical fibers now.
I don't know if you really need that super expensive glass. It really only has to last about 20 more years.
Optical coupling between your lens and your fiber. You need
Anyway,
to have
it's just a thought. I've talked about it before.
Lenses with
electric lights.
Put together all the small collectors.
Sunlight.
You can now try your device on
Healthy
the sun,
light.
and if needed, do some
Somehow you can block
I hope you
those
enjoy watching this
chemtrails
video.
with
Please
crystals
share
and
like it.
things
This
too.
will help me
So
to
I've
make more of
heard.
them.
Stuck in there. Like,
Bro, there are too many stories. I've seen some shit because I've followed a bunch of people like this that do this stuff on TikTok, and I was just like, oh, this is fucking amazing. And then most of them, yeah, were just like crawling, and they're like barely taking breaths and shit, and just squeezing through stuff. Barely, they have to breathe out to squeeze themselves through, and then breathe again. I'm like, God damn, man, that sounds like a boa constrictor, dude.
Well,
What the fuck
there's
is
some.
this? Like, I'm like you, man. I'm not built for
Yeah.
it. But these
Yeah,
channels
it's-
that they're riding through, I've seen this too, and this reminded me of root structures or veins that had been
And notice how
hollowed out.
how it's bifurcating. Now
Right.
these could be mining tunnels. That's a possibility.
fair.
I'm not
Sure.
claiming this is a root structure, but
No.
these are lava tubes,
dude.
and you can see the horizontal.
Those are
lines,
body parts.
but sometimes they're vertical lines. How the heck does that?
Ask RJ. He was there on the phone when he called me up and said, "What are you saying about these were Titans body parts?" Yeah, this was 7 years ago.
That works if it's lava that's forming it, right? Go if we go back to that one. I mean, you've got horizontal, and now this image they're going this way, and so the lava is just going to push through there, and it's going to carve this shape. I don't think so. And then you get splitting also. So I think that the lava tubes are either hollowed out former root structures or the roots themselves.
Okay, so he's switched over to trees.
Yeah. I tend, when I'm looking at most stuff, I haven't seen any really, really good examples of Titans other than the work that I've done. So I'm waiting for somebody else to find a slam dunk Titan and do some, the template is there. Just go through my Unveiling a Titan series and you'll see how to do it, and then do the same thing with whatever you found. So these are called tepuis. Again, you've got the plateau that looks like it was a former tree stump.
Body part. I mean, tree stump. Okay, so I don't think he's going to add anything. Maybe there's another picture.
These are salt mountains.
Where is this?
I don't know where those are.
Okay, that's fucking awesome.
And then there's one at the end of this list of photos here. That one there, that's cool. That looks just like what they were descending into.
Yeah, we did have time to go over the Bible. There was that. I'm going to read this verse and then come back to this chapter. We're going to look at this in the New King James Version. For there must be factions among you, that those who are approved may be recognized among you. The literal Berean says, for also it behooves Again, I think they lean a little bit too much on the KJV for their literal translation. Factions again. Wonder where they got that. Not from the KJV, but well, you were spared that. By that, I mean the sound of me. Well, in the parlance of my day, that was called hacking up a loogie. It's divisions. So we're going to come back to that.
Types that may or may
How
not
do we
be
keep
true.
track of
To
all
put it
these? Look at
simply,
him laugh like in a nutshell. RJ always uses that in a nutshell because it's the people that he must have learned it, and it does. So so here's basically. Do you know all about these? I kind of have studied all of them. I've been to Lutheran, Puritan, Dutch Reformed, Holiness, Baptist. I have been to a marriage ceremony at a Roman Catholic church, the Holy Name Cathedral, one of the biggest in Chicago. That is a mud flutter. As a matter of fact, the person that was getting married there was an NFL quarterback. His cousin of my wife, anyway. The best man was some soccer player named Kyle Rote Jr., who had won some famous contest. I was really hanging out with him. Anglican, not sure. Been to Pentecostal. I was a Presbyterian, am a Presbyterian. 45 years Presbyterian. You're not going to listen for 12 minutes.
aside from like stereotypes that may or may not be
Ooh,
true.
that was interesting. Look at Dutch reforms are nerdy. Presbyterians were robotic. Yep. Hippies. Yep. Pretty interesting. Wild. The Pentecostals. Oh yeah. They like to party. Long beards, pretty vague. Jumping ahead. Here, like
Especially because each Protestant tradition has liberal-leaning and conservative-leaning denominations that each have their own liberal and conservative factions within them, and the most radically liberal ones don't believe anything Christian anymore at all. There are some Protestant churches that have lesbian pastors and leftist political symbols,
wow.
and there's others that make the news for their right-wing beliefs. Some Protestant churches look very traditional and similar to Catholics. Other Protestant churches look very contemporary and don't resemble a traditional church at all. So is there anything that all of these different Protestant groups agree
The Trinity.
on? Yes, there actually is one thing. It's that the Bible has more authority than the church.
So there's two things.
A conservative Lutheran would say both the Bible and church tradition have a lot of authority, but the Bible has slightly more. A fundamentalist Baptist would say the Bible has a lot of authority,
Chuck
and church tradition
Swindoll.
doesn't have any authority at all, really. A progressive pastor would say neither the Bible nor church tradition have much authority at all.
Marriage. True love. We got to keep rolling. You guys don't buy that. Neither do I. The stock market. Let's just look at it quickly as we can. Equity, shares, ownership. The United States is a corporation that I guess is somehow crowdfunding. I've heard of it. We got a global market. Like you're on a spinning ball. You know what over the counter is? Do you know what OTC is? It's OCT for people with dyslexia. The people that do that repeating, they do the same thing over and over again. You know those guys. They repeat things and do the same thing over and over again. Not me. I was joking. Stock market. So everybody, this is gay. The people that developed it, I think, were Freemason Rosicrucian gay people that like to shave off their beards every day, no matter what, because they couldn't go to the store and buy a 10-pack of Bics for $15, like you or me. If I ever wanted to, I do. I have to buy them and trim up my neck and stuff here. So everybody's into the market. They got this. They got it all figured out with Q. Supply and demand going to meet you in the middle with a just-in-time delivery. I want to show you this though. Keep this picture of the stock market in your mind. This is the stock market over here. This part. We're going to be looking at the sidewalk in another picture. Ooh, there's the London Stock Exchange. That's nice. Boring. Everybody's into it. Look at them right from 1606, dated 9 September. Okay, here's this picture. This is the Wall Street crash. What's going on in the background? Are they building things or tearing them down? These ones don't exist anymore. This building doesn't look like it's brand new to me. Why is the sidewalk 2x4s? Doesn't that look at it? Boardwalk was a boardwalk. Something going on. So this is the stock market. Stock market, the world is on. It looks like things are out of control. Where would you put 2000? About right here? Because 2001, 9/11 is a big deal to me. Dividends. You got to get your dividends. They got it all figured out. Look at that. Every market value by sector. Well, not everyone, but enough for you to say, maybe I should buy Ford. I'm going to get my Schwab account. Let's look at the East India Stock Dividend Redemption Act. This is only one of them. They don't even mention it. When they call it one of the East India Loan Acts, 1859 to 1879, 93. That's not even dyslexia. Wow. Government of India Act. To 250,000 man military force. I wonder if the United States has that many people in the military today. That's a lot, but these guys just got passed off into the crown, transferred to the crown, and subsequently reduced in influence after they were incorporated into the British Indian Army. What a short Wikipedia page. This short title was conferred on this act by Section 1. Oh. Where? I see 3. Okay. It's just weird. I think they just found these things. So the stock exchange is different than the stock market. Here you're going to get unit trusts, derivatives. You need stockbrokers, sell short, buy long. Beginning in the Middle Ages, it says, the 1300s, Venetian lenders would carry slates with information on the various issues for sale and meet with clients. And much like a broker today, we're investing in lumber that we're going to pound over 20 million piers and then build stone castles on top. Who's with us? So they had to get rid of all these Dutch East Indias and British East India, Hudson Bay Company. What did they find? They're a pretty clever group of people, these Freemason, Rosicrucian. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. If you read the Bible, the Lord says, do not underestimate their ability to come up with shenanigans. That's a paraphrase. Bombay. You may not care about Bombay, but they do. There were only 15 pitchers in the stock market. The stock exchange has a couple of extra. Fancy. That makes me want to buy stock. Hey, you know what our government is famous for? Insider trading. That's how come these poor people from the farm like Dick Cheney end up as millionaires, billionaires working for Halliburton, becoming the vice president because of insider information. That's what I think is my opinion. I got a problem with him. Insider trading. Say no more. Nancy Pelosi, you just said it. You said it in your head. Misappropriation. They're so guilty they changed it and said, no, it's just part of our job. We can't help it. We can't be charged with it. It just gets into us. It's unavoidable. We can't go to jail for it. Insider trading. Well, real robber barons in the game of railroads. This was one of the first games, and it was because this really is how they did it. And they've got everybody with their globe-loving mentality. Sid Meier's railroad tycoon. I mean, it was one of the first games, and I think I played it in 1990. I was the assistant administrator for the warehouse and the mailroom. And the man who was running it had this game, and while sometimes he would write books and stuff for the school too. He'd play this, he'd let me play it. And you just trade stocks, man. But there really were robber barons, and they really did in 1829 base everything on somebody who just showed up. They were going to have a contest to say, what's better, a stationary steam engine or one that is doing the locomotion? Because everybody wants to do the locomotion. This is a cutout of what, well, here, let me give you the whole story, then we'll look at the pictures. So the whole deal was there was a contest. The rocket was designed and built by Robert Stephenson in 1829 and built for the 4th Street Works of his company in Newcastle upon Tyne. The rocket was not the first steam locomotive. It was the first to bring together several innovations that produced the most advanced locomotive. Everybody, you knew it. I can't do in a brand new dance now. It's the most famous example of an evolving 150 years later, boom, the rocket. It was a contest. It was built because they were going to have a contest. Built at a time of rapid development. Several differences of opinion who should be given the credit, but we know it's George and his company. The rocket. He was a rocket man. They show a picture and say, look at the rocket. Here's the rocket back here. This is not the rocket. I don't know why. Because this is the notable part of the rocket. It looks wood, does it not? The drawing is a little different than the cutout I imagined when I saw this drawing that, unless you go to the museum, there's that noticeable feature. Kind of like a notable feature. This is the one that's preserved. Thanks for the small picture, Wikipedia. We didn't want to look at it anyway. Is that a small picture? Yeah. So this is the Locomotive Hall of Fame. Wood painted yellow, replica. side elevation. Okay, it's a little more complicated. Still looks wooden. Is that wood? Well, that's got its place for the steam. Light it up, put it on wheels. Some pretty fine machining. Keep it lubricated. Chug around the floor. It's a brand new dance.
And the flow keeps going. And it's not just the Nafion tube through the tube. And the experiment is shown here. You take the tube and you quickly, you fill it with water to make sure there are no air bubbles. Put it in a water bath that also contains microspheres, so you can see if there's any movement. Put it in the microscope, and the result is shown here. So you see, so you have the flow, and the flow keeps going. And it's not just the Nafion tube. It's also, we found the same thing occurring in a gel. We cut a tunnel inside a gel, a cylindrical tunnel, and you can see it here that there's an exclusion zone, and right in the center are all the microspheres, and the video shows what happens. You've got constant flow through there. That is shown here. And in this case, we take a polymer, Nafion, and it comes in sheets, so we just cut the sheet and place the sheet down in the bottom of the chamber and add the water and the microspheres and see what happens. And this is what happens. The exclusion zone builds up and it builds, and this video is cut prematurely. It'll extend out to something like 300, 400, 500 microspheres.
So this helps the water. If it was meet an obstruction, water's going to win. All of the dams they built 100 years ago, or a little bit less than that, with the works projects and everything else, they're all temporary. Just one more minute. Don't ban me, YouTube.
I'll build these easy layers that stack on one another, one at a time, growing like this. And so that would be one way to account for this kind of structure. And if you look at one...
I think that's the true shape of water. Would probably be H8 O16.
One plane of this structure, it looks something like this. It's a bit like ice, but it's not exactly ice. However, if you count the number of oxygens and hydrogens, it's not H2O. It's actually H3, it's H3O2. So you might say that this zone of water...
Well, we can all have our opinion. One more second.
Water is very well structured, and the fact that you have 6 dots around here means it's a hexagonal structure. So they concluded that the water inside these capsules are ordered hexagonal sheets of water. So the answer to question 2 is the easy, physically distinct from the bulk. Yes, it's...
But not according to Professor Dave. You know, Professor Dave goes, he wants to debunk structured water, so he gets a couple of people that recently heard about it and are kind of like excited about it, and he uses them as the experts. I kid you not.
Definitions and just bring you into the amazing world of structure.
If there are enough people who are willing to buy some useless thing, be. Let's hear it from the experts themselves.
So we've done a little...
These people never claimed to be experts. It's so disingenuous the way, but that's what we're used to now.
Motion makes it split off a certain way.
That's right.
Right?
No, not right. It's just water molecules moving around. A vortex does not perform electrolysis.
Vortex doesn't take the whiskers off a woman's chin?
And use it as a coaster, though I bet it's quite a bit pricier. Now, if...
Yeah, they're amateurs. And they, let's make so none of this is true, because Liars get paid to
He
lie.
just subjected samples of water to different conditions upon freezing, like different pressures and rates of temperature change as the crystallization.
So everyone can believe, everybody is going to believe what they believe. This is weird, though. I just thought, remember this?
Rocks that sometimes
12 years
explode
ago.
due to heating and pressure in Earth's
12 years
atmosphere. But when we examine the Russian meteor, does this explanation fit with the facts?
Well, it was big. They say it was the biggest thing to hit the Earth in 100 years. It didn't really hit the surface
It didn't
of
hit
the Earth
the
because
Earth.
it exploded high in the atmosphere. And this itself raises an important question because it's not actually understood how all of this happened. Ironically, the event was caught on many cameras because Russian drivers, in order to defend themselves in court or to collect insurance, had installed dashboard cameras.
Wait a minute. Those primitive Russians were doing that way back when? I thought they were primitive Russians.
So many were driving eastward in the vicinity of Chelyabinsk, Russia, February 15th, and suddenly they and their cameras had a perfect
He
view
looks like he could be an American. He's got car seat, going to work in the morning.
of an incredible
But
spectacle
boom!
as this cosmic intruder lit up the dawn sky.
Based on infrasound data from around the world, NASA scientists now say that the meteorite was more than 1,000 times larger than originally believed. This modified conclusion reveals the difficulty for astronomers in explaining the extraordinary energies of the exploding meteor.
Wow.
The evolving perhaps 10 tons. But just a bit later in the morning, astonishing infrasound data from stations as far away as Greenland and Africa came in. At the low frequencies of infrasound, well below human hearing, the event was heard around the world. NASA then released new estimates of the Earth. Then in just half a minute, it released the energy of some 20 or more Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs, including a blinding flash that was described by one observer as bright as 10 suns. Onlookers had to turn away from the glare. It's hard to see how the common picture could even work. Heat the leading edge of the rock just to a melting temperature, and every bit of melted rock would continually be blown off the object by the winds at thousands of miles per hour. How could the spectacular blast of light by this object be produced in such a way? The blinding flare-up saturated the cameras, a perfect analogy to the electric glare.
Remember, I didn't do a show this morning, so I said I really wanted this to be good. I mean, this has been a good show, and this stuff, crazy, right? It's insane.
Of an arc furnace or an arc welder. One video in particular requires closer examination because it's suggestive of exploding material, much like you see in arc welding, projected in the direction of the object's flight. We can't vouch for the authenticity of this video, nor should we ignore it. We can only hope it will be scrutinized up
Whoa!
to the level it deserves.
Oh, you know what that reminds me of? I'm going to save this video. I'm going to go back to this part here. Oh, I know what that's shooting off.
Forgot to notice that Democratic
Be
elections
quiet,
network.
you. I'm trying to type in new words. How do you spell sodium? I've seen that explosion before. I know I have.
And testing its flammability. We can test for the fact that we produce sodium hydroxide by
Okay.
adding
No.
phenolphthalein.
We need slow motion,
So you're-
man. Slow motion. That's fluorine. Well, you can look it up. It shoots off like that. It shoots off in crazy directions.
Hold my breath.
See? It shoots out from the front of it. And it's kind of like a metal. I'm not saying that that's what it is. But it sure looked like it.
What is certain is that the meteor did explode, and in the manner expected of a charged body disintegrating under electrical stresses. You see this in an exploding capacitor as non-conductive material violently breaks down. That's the electrical interpretation of this Russian meteor explosion.
I don't know.
Another example in the electrical viewpoint would be the sudden flaring and disintegration of negatively charged comets, as occurred in the
Oh, right. Yeah, sure. So now I think you're going to go take it to Augusta, but look at some of the damage this thing caused. You might find it interesting.
reaching the ground. Complicating this question of size is the fact that the envisioned 10,000-ton body failed to create any impact site on Earth. But if the picture is left in confusion, that's because no one has addressed the evident electrical component of the event. Infrasound is the efficient vehicle for sound transmission from
Infrasound.
electrical blasts, such as lightning from the upper atmosphere. It's electrical energy that fills in the missing pieces of the story. Scientists loosely concluded that the rock
Watch it
was
hit
perhaps
the
55
windows.
feet in diameter, arriving at 40,000 miles per hour, producing a trail some.
Is this a biblical thing? Was this a sign then? When did Russia changed, right? I mean, weren't they fighting in Ukraine? Isn't that when this war really started? 2014, 2015? Not the war we funded, a proxy war. We don't fight anymore because we got embarrassed by Afghanistan. Those vicious fiends.
125 miles long. A huge explosion high in the atmosphere produced a shock wave injuring 1,400 people, largely from flying glass. That explosion makes this an unprecedented event in modern times. This entire display occurred in just 30 seconds, and it's been assumed that the explosion occurred because of internal heat and pressure. But how likely is it that in just 30 seconds?
So earlier, I might as well read this beginning here. So what got me going on this situation? I'm going to read it one more time. This is after I talked to RJ when there was going to be no show this morning. I hung up. I looked around. I wrote down, there is no beginning of a vortex spiral spinning down the drain, sparks thinking, gestalt type thinking. We were studied by rats in large maze that John Calhoun studied us like rats. When it comes to gay sex, the Bible is clearly against it in every circumstance. God hates abortion. He calls it child sacrifice. No gravity is pulling you towards the center of a globe. And no way could you have avoided hearing this and now seeing this. And we have a couple more tabs, and then I'm going to read that 11th chapter of First Corinthians, and then we'll get on with it. One last thing. Oh no, you're a maniac. I've never seen this video. That is not a good idea. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. It's just really the difference between Gestalt psychology, Gestalt therapy, Gestalt, whatever. Theory of perception that emphasizes the processing of entire patterns and configurations and not merely individual components. So you didn't just see the sodium in the water. You saw the explosion. So they've lost me. Their structuralist psychology is, I'm finding fault in it quick. They would say it's often associated with the adage, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I've heard that. I've heard that quote. It differs from it, the psychology aspect and the therapy. They want to make a big deal that that's not it. But do you ever get to see? I mean, this is a really long thing. They did it recently. With her husband, I guess. So new, but everything's new because they got tired of rubbing people's head and said you're white enough. That's just crazy. It's crazy that we went through this. And I guess I was looking up hydroponics because of the water, I guess. But anyway, I do want to read this, but then see if there's one more video I wanted to talk about. But we're going to do it in the ESV in the 11th chapter of First Corinthians. Here we go. I know that people aren't going to like this because they hate to think that they would have to ever be the head of their wife for real if it came right down to it. That's the day nobody wants. I'm your spiritual head. Like hell you are. Ooh, I didn't see that coming. It's not everybody. Verse 3, but I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. That's why I think it's okay for girls to pray and prophesy. Just got to do it with a covered head. Yeah, I go women. If the Bible wasn't for women deacons, I wouldn't be for women deacons. It's just that they're not elders. They don't. They deal with other specific issues that involve the women. They don't run the money. They're not that kind of deacon. It's complicated. since it is the same as if her head were shaven. That's not always a good look. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. For a man ought to cover his head, since he is the image and glory, ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. That came out of nowhere. Verse 11. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so now man is born of woman, and all things are from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature teach you it's abhorrent? I mean, does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it's a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it's her glory. For her hair is given to her for a covering. If That's why you don't shave it off. Verse 16, if anyone is inclined to be contentious, you want to break it down and have some divisions, we'll go back to the Bible. You know? So if you want to be contentious and say that you don't need a covering, well, the pictures that we see from the old days and their practices and the other churches of God, they covered. So if you want to be inclined to be contentious, you're not going to find any other churches that are going, yeah, we like our women shaved, bitch, or something like, they get contentious. But in the following instructions, I do not commend you, because when you came together, it is not for the better, but the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you. And I believe it in part, for there must be factions among you in order that those who are genuine among you may be recognized. When you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper that you eat. It is not the Lord's Supper that you eat. For in eating, each one goes ahead with his own meal. One goes hungry, another gets drunk. What? Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I commend you in this? No, I will not. For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, this is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So there's an argument in some camps, RJ, of the whole new lifting the veil movement, that why would anybody need, unless you just want to do it for symbolism, but the real people that, it was to be done until he comes. I don't know if we're still commanded that you have to do it like that or that you can't. But I know that it's a pretty good argument that it's like baptism. We know that the thief on the cross didn't have time to get baptized. Whoever therefore eats the bread and drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord. So I've seen a lot of people take what they think is transubstantiated communion from the Roman Catholic priest, and they're still walking around kicking it, thinking they got it going on, making sure they're not the ones whose children are getting woohoo by the what you can get in the Roman Catholic world for a couple of Snickers bars, from what I heard. It's that easy, I guess. Gestalt, somehow everything all working together. I know that I'm working with the spirit that all of my life has led me to this. I don't have to wonder what I'm going to do to make a living. I did that. I already did that. I was born when there were 48 states. The Lord started showing me this in 1981, finished me off in 2014 with, here's what you're going to do. And now it's being done. I'm despising not the days of small beginning. I'm still in the back of my mind thinking, I do have to remember to look more into those fiber optics, because if we're going to be living in caves and underground and finding tunnels, to survive some encompassing about, we're going to, maybe that fiber optics would help. But I can't always be distracted in doing that. I got to do this show. I got to finish my university crap. And always be led by the Spirit. And you know it. If you share that Spirit, you know. I'm not lying to you. This is a flat earth nation. The golden age is past. Not because I named a YouTube channel that in 2016, Flat Earth Nation, Golden Age Past, documented history, but because it's what God showed me and I had no choice. Because me and my friends are called, chosen, predestined, adopted, known from before the foundation of the earth to be saved by grace. And once you're saved by grace and realize how much you must suffer for his name's sake, you realize he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And you can build up gold, silver, and precious stone by doing good works that he has planned before you from before the foundation of the earth. Me and my friends are never going to tell you anything else. Why would we? We're trying to prove we have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nachgemein.